Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. And thank you so much for the invitation. It is a pleasure for me to have the chance to explain about the submission and registration process in Latin America to this audience. The idea of this presentation is divided in the agenda you can see over here. So initiated with the opportunities we can see in the Latin region, the Argentinian general overview, and then the registration process itself, and coming particularly with the information and regulatory overview, product registration, and the key elements that you might need to register in Argentina, and end it with the takeaway messages. Let's begin with the opportunities in the region. The idea of presenting you this slide from my Kpbma about the 20 global top markets and their forecasts in business, in the pharmaceutical business. It's just to bring your attention in the three key countries, Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina, as always. But just to point out here the relevance of Argentina in the Latin American business. The expectations looks good. Let's see if this develops in this way. There were too many impacts, not only because of the current political situation, but also because of the pandemic. However, the Argentina pharmaceutical business keep growing, and I believe it will be the same for the next years. This slide, it's coming from SILFA. SILFA is the National Association of Pharmaceutical Companies. It's the Association of National Pharmaceutical Companies. And this is their last report. And what I would like you to see is the relevance of the Argentinian business in the Latin American total pharmaceutical business. The distribution of sales in the Latin American region, as you can see, it's very well impacted by Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina. And we are always, when we think about regional regulatory strategies together with our business development teams, we include the information of the 4 key territories: Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, and Brazil. They have the more stringent regulations, but also with them, we have 75% of the pharmaceutical business of the region. Makes sense also to see that there are relevant opportunities and some scenarios changing, like, for example, Central America, but SILFA is taking well note and explaining this in this slide. And this third slide, it's just to talk to you about the relevance of the local industry in Argentina. This slide lets you see the the percentages of national companies versus international companies. If you see this, the composition of this difference in Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and why Uruguay is over here, between national and multinational companies. Brazil, it's in the 50%. Mexico has something more, but Argentina has 78% of national companies. This means that there are a lot of national producers, mainly for generics, or branded generics, as we call them. But the 22% of the internationals are multinationals more related to innovation. And there is room for growing. However, the national industry has a lot of power in the generation and in the development of policies for the pharmaceutical industry and for the health industry itself. In Uruguay, as you can see, it's a third part, but mainly because there are a lot of Argentinas together with Uruguayan companies all together located there. Uruguay is a kind of center of distribution for the South, for part of the Latin American region of multi-Latina companies coming from Brazil or from Argentina. Let's jump now into Argentina itself. We have here very simple information. It's funny because up to last week, we were 45.7 millions. But just last week, we had a survey. Every 10 years, we make the population survey. And now we are 47.5 million. So this changed a little bit. It was part of the expected development of the population. And just to mention, the market size, it's relevant, as we were seeing before, 4,791 millions. And the healthcare system is a mixed system, including public, private, and what we call social security. And we will come for more detail in the next slide. The healthcare map in Argentina, as I mentioned, is mixed because we have the population, here are the total percentage of the population, divided in different payers. We have the public. Here, the payment comes from the universal tax of all the inhabitants and all the contributors. And here it's a population that it's not covered under neither the social security nor the private system. So they are unemployed, or they have a very non-consistent or non-formal employment. In this case, the population has the alternative to be treated with national, provincial, or county health. That depends on the level of healthcare they might need. And this represents 33% of the population. Let's talk now about private, because I think it's easier before we jump into social security. Private is the out-of-pocket market that depends on user or customers that proactively hired. The AMP means Empresas de Medicina Prepaga, that means prepaid medicine companies. So it's a proactive decision, and this 2.2 millions being a small percentage, the 5%, it's only paid in this way. And there are around 200 payers entities of the private sector. Let's talk now about social security. Social security, the big mass of the Argentinian population, 60%, depends on a system which is a solidarity. It's based on solidarity, where employers and employees pay contributions. And these are divided depending on the situation. I mean, employees and families, it's the 15 millions that you can see over there. Under OSN, that are Obras Sociales Nacionales, are the agencies of social security. And then we have the pensioned people and the employees and pensioned from universities, social, the militaries and teachers. All these 60% has this system. However, from the 15 millions, 4 millions are shifted into the private because of specific regulation that allows the social security system to employ the private sector for some healthcare. So this is more or less the overall way the social security system is divided in Argentina. Let's jump now into the regulatory overview itself. Argentina has a regulatory agency called ANMAT. It's Administración Nacional de Medicamentos, Alimentos y Tecnología Médica. So it is National Administration of Medicine, Food and Medical Technology. ANMAT is a decentralized body that was created in 1992, dependent on the Ministry of Health. And it has the alternative of creates their own pieces of regulations aligned with the Ministry of Health regulations. The scope of ANMAT are all kinds of products, including drug products, medical devices, food supplements and food itself, cosmetics, biologics, odontological products, in vitro diagnosis, and hygienic products. There are different departments taking care of each product classification. ANMAT regulates and guarantees that all these drugs, foods, and medical devices go under specific authorization processes, keep surveillance, and are inspected. Both products and companies that can be the marketing authorizations holders, manufacturers, or importers. In 2011, ANMAT was nominated by the PAHO Level 4 Regional Reference Regulatory Agency. This was a very important path for ANMAT in the moment where PAHO was working in very specific working groups together, the full region, trying to align regulations and working towards reliance. Today, there are other 5 regional reference regulatory agencies already nominated by PAHO, like level 4. Something very important from ANMAT is that we are not yet in the process where the assessments reports and the product submission list, it's public. This information is still under the agency management, and we, the public, cannot access to this. From the regulatory agencies from the region, only Anvisa, the Brazilian agency, is getting this kind of transparency. And it is important to work toward it. We will talk a little bit in the next slide about this topic. ANMAT used to have paper-based registration. However, it was initially gradually changed with pandemic, fully changed into electronic system. This improved a lot the interaction with the agency. However, we still need to ensure and review some processes because there is not only one electronic system implemented, but different electronic systems depending on the product classification, which make the interaction with the agency a little bit complex. However, all in all, the results of the electronic system implementation, it's very positive. Some words about patent protection. Argentina has implemented a patent law, and since the year 2000 includes the pharmaceutical products. Before it was not. However, there's no data exclusivity and no data protection. So in the way we link approval beyond ANMAT, before ANMAT, with patent protection itself. It's very important to bear this in mind because the patentability is quite restricted, and pharmaceutical companies should make very specific applications to ensure the protection of their inventions. It's something that We are discussing within the associations, mainly the situation of data protection, but at the time being, this is the current status. On the other hand, as I mentioned before, there is a big impact of the local industry. So the agency, in a way, it's developing there are some regulations which really protect this environment from the political perspective, but also from the economical perspective. There is a lot of work related to that. Coming now to ANMAT itself, I want to mention that ANMAT is a member of PICS since long ago. ANMAT is also a member of Mercosur. Mercosur is one of the first economic trade and commercial agreements in South America. However, from the regulatory perspective, it has small pieces of regulation with real impact. In general, it's very important for commercialization and importation. But for some topics, like GMP certifications, is important because we have agreed with all Mercosur members GMP certifications requirements, and we accept the certifications of the other member states. ANMAT is also affiliate member of the Medical Device Single Audit Program, and this moved a lot the registration, the regulatory law about the registration of medical devices. It is also an observer of ICH, and this is why we are still not being so transparent in our way of publishing the assessments and the list of submissions. But it's something that ANMAT is willing to be part of the ICH. I'm pretty sure it will happen, but in some years. Then ANMAT is also participant of different forums, strengthened cooperations, and overall implementing communications tools to collaborate with PAHO, with all the reference authorities, but also with PAHO itself. It's very interesting because here ANMAT, it's taking the lead of some working groups. ANMAT is also an associated member of the International Coalition of Medicine Regulatory Agencies, and within the pandemic took a very interesting role in signing agreements with the European Medicine Agency, and also participated in interaction and meetings with other national regulatory agencies, the reference one from the region, to ensure and to exchange experiences about COVID decisions and COVID registration process and emergency decisions. Let's jump now into the registration process in Argentina itself and the requirements. This first slide, it's a very overall information slide, only to mention some key topics, and we will go in detail later. We say that Argentina has an agency called ANMAT. I've already explained about that. It's the only arm for registering medicines. Then we have overall information about time for the evaluation of the registration of the products. Depending on the product classification, we might face 6 months registration to 12, we can say, and then up to 36. Why? Because in cases like biological, we might need an inspection of the manufacturing site, and the plan of this inspection might need time on top of the registration timeline, making a total timeline of 36 months. FDA, MAA reference approval well, UNMAT has, we can say it's not mandatory, but it's nice to have because it reduces registration timelines and registration requirements, both. And we will go in very detail in some minutes. Which are the main requirements if we want to register a pharmaceutical product in Argentina are depending on the product classification, the CPP, it's key, coming either from the country of reference or the country of origin, the GMP certification of the manufacturing site, CTD, here we are mentioning mainly module 3, but also requires module 2, like non-clinical and clinical summary, and depending on the product classification, even from module 4 and 5, relevant information of the clinical trials and non-clinical studies, summaries and conclusions, and of course, labeling and patient different information. And which is the key regulation to register products in Argentina? The main umbrella after the law of medicine is the one issued by UNMAT, it's the decree 150. The decree 150 is issued by the executive, creating UNMAT and creating the product classifications in 1992 for innovative and branded generics. Later on, UNMAT developed further pieces of regulation, including the disposition of 7075 in 2011, which is the first regulation that was issued in the region for biological products and biosimilars, complemented later on with the other regulations we are listing here. And then a very interesting topic to keep in mind is that comparability studies are required depending on the product classification. So the extension of the clinical data will depend, should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis because it crosses several pieces of regulation that will define later on which are the real requirements. We will go later on into some examples. So we talk already about the decree 150 from 1992, and what is included in that decree is this list of reference countries. Annex 1 and Annex 2. You can see here the countries that are there. It's important to mention that the European Union is not recognized at a country itself, but only the individual countries listed. And all countries not listed neither in Annex 1 nor in Annex 2 are considered non-listed countries and should be treated in the way we will discuss, because this annex gives us the environment for the registration. Annex 1 is related with Article 4 from the decree. Annex 2 is related to Article 4 as well, in case of importing products, in both cases. And then talking about, for example, Korea as manufacturing site will be neither one nor the other. So it will be related to Article 5. We will come in 1 minute to that level of detail. First of all, let me make some basis, pointing out some basic information. In Argentina, in order to act as a marketing authorization holder and sell pharmaceutical products, it is mandatory necessary to be a company responsible for placing them. So either food company that can be a local branch of an international company or can be an Argentinian partner, but has to be fully as a manufacturer or seller of the pharmaceutical products. Depending on the process to be carried out in Argentina, the structural requirements vary from if we have finished product warehouse or quality control area. But quality control area, it's a basis for an importer in Argentina. So these requirements are based in what we discussed before, the Mercosur, the regional directives, but are basically oriented into GMP practices. Commercialization of pharmaceutical products then is subject to previous approval. So first we need a company already authorized. Then we can submit a marketing authorization application. For them, these products, once authorized, the marketing authorization application is approved, it has to be incorporated into what is called the Registro de Especialidades Medicinales, the REM of the Ministry of Health. That's the first step to be allowed to sell pharmaceutical products in the country. And as mentioned, only laboratories with legal authorization issued by ANMAT, including full facilities, GMP certification by ANMAT, qualified person recognized, the qualified person should be a pharmacist, and other basic technical requirements can register and import the products. And this is the same for pharmaceuticals or for medical products. The minimum requirements are the quality control lab, which means physicochemical laboratory plus microbiology, and then warehouse that can be own warehouse or contract with a logistics supplier partner. There is no specification in the legislation, but it's something that when the agency is coming, it's part of the inspection, weighing room and secondary packaging areas, small ones are required. And this is an experience of all the companies, multinational and national. The products can be either local manufactured in own facilities, manufactured in third parties, or fully imported. So the registration process basically is the same. Then the explanation of how and where they are manufactured defines the GMP certifications, the registration pathway, and the final agreement for the sale. For all imported products, what is interesting to point out is that the requirements of the dossier are minimum when these products are already approved and commercialized in reference countries of the Annex 1 of the decree already seen. Let's move now to the Argentina regulation and some basic requirements and definitions. In the Argentina regulation, the expression similar pharmaceutical products is related to what we call branded generics, because we are talking about same API, same strength, same or similar, very similar dosage form, same administration route, same indication, and same posology. What can differ to register a similar pharmaceutical product is like the shape of the pharmaceutical dosage form, or the size, the excipients, the shelf life, and the packaging material. But having a similar product on the market, you already have a reference for a second registration. And other terminology that is included in the Argentinian regulation is evidence. This means that it's mandatory need to be demonstrated that the product is approved, but also commercialized in the country of reference or in the country of origin. So the CPP from these countries that will be included in the pharmaceutical dossier that will be submitted should include the commercialization clause. And other evidence to demonstrate commercialization that can be added to the CPP with this clause are packaging material, including batch numbers and expiring dates, or copy of vademecums or compendiums, commercial compendiums or vademecums. But it's key to demonstrate commercialization, because if not, it's more complex, the revision process. Talking about bioequivalence, I only would like to point out here that the regulation is implemented, is in place. However, it is for a number of molecules, around between 60 and 70 molecules, mainly with narrow therapeutic windows. So once you want to register a branded generic, the decision of developing or not a local bioequivalence study, it's related to the list included in the regulation and must be very, very precisely checked. And another term that I would like to share with you is what we call effective commercialization authorization or first batch approval prior to commercialization. This is a step in the registration process after the marketing authorization, the marketing application authorization, mandatory before the launch of the product. We will come back later, but keep this in mind and understand that related to this, we have a full analytical transfer from the manufacturer related to quality control of the dosage form, the materials exchange and the submissions of the results of the first test of the first batch that was imported to the country. We talk about the Article 3, Article 4, Article 5. In this scheme, you will see very, very summarized the differences between one and the others, and what I understand might be of impact for you, for this audience. The Article 4, that is related to imported products, it's only related to those products with registration and commercialization in any of the Annex 1 list. These are the CPP's statements. These are the evidence that we need here, or the requirements are the CPP, including the GMP statement, the information about the shelf life, the information about who's the manufacturing site in the CPP, and the packaging material. The first application will not require analytical methods, only in this second step I mentioned before, the first batch authorization. But for the first marketing authorization application, the submission file is very narrow. CPP, GMP, packaging materials, basically technical information, very basic, and the proposed local leaflet. If we think in Korea and talking about imported products from Korea, in this case, we will be talking about an imported Article 4. This means that the main difference is that we will need to certify the manufacturing site. We will need a prerequisite before the marketing authorization application of certification of the manufacturing site. And we will then talk about details. The evidence is not applicable, but it's recommended. So if you have a product where it is manufactured in Korea, but it is also registered and commercialized in Korea or in any other territory that includes Annex 1 or Annex 2 or non-listed, it might be useful at the time of the revision. And then the CMC will be a full Module 3 CTD, and the clinical will be the summaries plus the Module 2 plus the summaries of the key pivotal clinical trials or the key non-clinical tests. And of course, the proposed leaflets. In both cases, we have the timelines. The Article 4 will be very clear, between 6 and 10 months the approval, but for Article 5, we cannot give a precise timeline because it depends on the GMP certification inspection, and it could take up to 12 months, plus the revision time that should be 12 months, more or less. Okay, these are the key frameworks of when you decide a regulatory pathway. And what is very important is Article 3, Article 4, and Article 5 are related to synthetic products and small molecules. non-biologics. In biologics, we will come now more detail. Let's go very quickly through this slide because it's the basic explanation of the full Article 4 registration steps. So in order to register and launch a product by the regulatory pathway of Article 4, so this means the product already approved and commercialized in one of the countries listed as Annex 1, you have the first step, which is the submission of the packaging authorization, the second step, which is the first batch approval, and then the third step, which is the product launch itself. For the submission, you will have to compile the dossier, including legal, technical, medical documentation, and it takes from 6 to 10 months for the approval. Once approved, we will submit the first batch authorization, and here we will need to submit analytical transfer information, including the module 3 for the drug product. And the agency will perform the quality control inspection of that first imported batch in order to approve it to the market. When this is done, we present the results, and within 2 to 3 months, we will receive the first batch approval. And later on, with the product launch, we'll have to notify to the Argentinian Vademecum, so to the Argentinian compendium, this is the agency's compendium, get some clear numbers for the national security system and health care system, and with that we can launch. So best approach for launch, the best case timeline is 8 months, if everything goes well and we have no deficiency letter. Or a base case could be 13, 14, 15 months. Now, the same exercise thinking in Article 5, so synthetics or small molecules, non-Annex 1 or 2 and non-listed countries, or biological products, all biological products independently of if they are in Annex 1 or 2, or for biologics, we have no relation with the listed countries. Here we have a prerequisite, which is the GMP certification. And these timelines will affect the total of the project. Why? Because the GMP certification submission, it's a process itself, not only because of the compilation with all the site master file translated into Spanish and the other requirements, but then the authority will evaluate and define whether this site must be inspected by the agency or not. Due to pandemia, the inspections were shifted into remote inspections or paper inspections. That means that the agency was only evaluating the electronic dossier submitted, or they were doing some virtual inspections, certifications. In any case, the timelines for these certifications are between 6 to 12 months. So it is a timeline that must be considered. After that, we have the same approach, similar like for Article 4, submission, first batch, and product launch. Only with the difference of the complexity of the requirements and with the change in the total timeline for the launch of the product. So the best case, total launch, the total timeline for launching a biologic or a product, Article 5, it's 22 months to 28 months, depending on the GMP certification. So just in a nutshell, which are the requirements for registering a product? We have said CTD, the country-specific requirements, the GMP, the risk management plan, and the quality information. Why I'm making a special note for risk management plan? Because the risk management plan must be submitted as a prerequisite together with the manufacturing site certification prior to the submission of the marketing authorization application. So GMP and risk management plan are key for having the chance of full marketing authorization submission. Then the CTD, its base, the number of granules of the CTD, so the level of documentation from the CTD we will need will depend on the product classification, as we have discussed before. And the country-specific requirements are almost the same in all cases, like powers of attorney, local sites authorizations, local legal representative authorizations, international letters of authorizations, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, quality at the time of the first batch might require complementary Module 3 information of what we have already submitted of the CTD for the drug product when we are performing the first batch inspection. So, ANMAT platform, this is the electronic platform, requires CTD dossier with some customized organization because, as mentioned, ANMAT is non-ICH, but they accept CTD format with the forms or the basis of the requirements in local language and oriented into what are the key templates. Electronic submission is not applicable because the system, the platform, it's electronically based, but not electronically submission with the interfaces and so on. We are not there yet. Then for Module 3 documents, full Module 3 in case of biologics or Article 5, or the specific Module 3 in first batch inspections for Article 4 should be submitted in Spanish. There is no way out. And the same for the legal documents that can be issued either bilingual or should be translated, certified, and duly apostilled. In the case of Module 4 and 5, here can be accepted in English. It's a case-by-case situation. Honestly, we have all kinds of experiences with the agency, but recently the English versions are fine. And I would like to make a note here with the quality of the translations, because it is key for the agency in the discussion with the sponsor to have good technical translations, because if they identify non-understandable translations, they are directly denegating the application. They reject the application directly. All this is applicable to no Annex 1, no Annex 2, like Korea, when we talk about the full CTD implementation or all the modules. Well, now we will go a little bit more in depth in the information itself. I will try to move to the key topics, and of course, at the time of the questions, you can ask, particularly if there's something not clearly understood. So, general procedure: the commercialization of pharmaceutical products in Argentina must be approved by ANMAT. We need to include the marketing authorization in the Ministry of Health registration to have the chance to sell them. Only local pharmaceutical companies legally authorized with key facilities can register the products. And the minimum requirements of these labs are quality control labs with capacity not only to analyze the products to be imported, but also with microbiologic lab. The warehouse, either in-house or with a logistic supplier contract, and the alternatives of packaging and weighing room. And then the marketing authorization application is valid for 5 years And every 5 years, we must mandatorily renew these applications. The key regulation we have already discussed, the decree and those other regulations that are modifying or complementing the list of the countries, Annex 1, Annex 2, and what they call the rest of the countries. When we come to products, we can divide the product classification in general products, new chemical entities, branded generics, or biological and biosimilar products. In new chemical entities, we can include small molecules. For general new chemical entities and branded generics, we will have you have to decide whether we go through the Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, depending on the manufacturer country of the product, and if this product is an innovation or it's a product where we have already a reference in other territories. And depending on that, we have the number of requirements to be fulfilled and the timelines that are necessary to approve the products. Coming to biologic, here we have the list of products that are considered for the regulation, hemoderivates, products obtained from recombinant DNA, monoclonal antibodies, biologic products obtained from biologic fluids or tissues of animal origin, and other biological products. And of course, included all biosimilar products. I mean, the same piece of regulation is covering both. So, which are the requirements? Here you will have more summarized information of what I have been explaining before. You will always have a registration form. Currently, it's part of the platform, so it's an electronic registration form, and the payment of the authority fee to initiate the marketing authorization application. Then the technical information, Module 3, CTD, and what you can see listed here, bioavailability data if accepted or if required because of the classification, or bioequivalence in the case we are talking about a branded generic and it is applicable because of law. In an Article 4, it's a reduced dossier, and this is very clear, important information for the step. The registration process and timeline, depending on what we have defined, we register, we can have as many deficiency letters as the agency defines. Only for biological products, there are 2 rounds of deficiency letters, and then you can receive the rejection. But for synthetics, as the product is going through different departments, you can receive a deficiency letter from each department. It is not a unified deficiency letter from all the departments. And then you receive either the approval or the rejection, depending on your documentation. The first batch I have already mentioned. This is the legislation, and the number of documents that should be included. What is very important to point out is that inspectors that are coming to the agency may come or not when we are doing the first quality control of this first batch inspected. And if they come, they perform all the tests with you. If they are not coming, you in any case need to provide them with the results and with the summary. And only with their approval, the product is able to be launched. Here, talking about generics, I would like to point out that Argentina has no generics regulation for itself. So the generics are not described as one specific product classification. That's why branded generics are covering what you can use as generic regulation. So the process is exactly the same. The only relevant topic here is to evaluate the bioequivalence requirement to be developed in case the API is listed in the regulation. If that's the case, it is necessary to present to the agency to submit the bioequivalence protocol, to inform them with the different status until the final of the study, until the study report. And generic can be marketed either as branded generic with a commercial name, or as a generic itself, which is usually the product that is going to hospitals and to public healthcare sector. The timelines remains the same like for synthetics. This is more in-depth information about biologics, the regulation, the requirements, and what is the regulation particular for biosimilars, which makes precise requirement or biocompatibility studies. I think this is very important because sometimes the biocompatibility studies are not fully developed, and in that case, biosimilars cannot be registered. The registration timelines, we have already discussed them before. I think here you have more detail, particularly for biologics, in case someone is interested, can go more in detail and evaluate this information. Just some words about post-approval changes. As I mentioned before, renewal, it's an administrative submission every 5 years in Argentina for synthetic products. And we can say also for biological products, the key difference is that the platforms are different, biologic and synthetics. So in synthetics will be always only administrative. In the case of biologic, they ask to make it administrative, but if there are main changes, it must be a moment where these changes have to be submitted. It has to be evaluated case by case. We still have this renewal process as one of the relevant administrative processes more than technical and clinical or efficacy safety renewal process. Then the variations are divided into minor and major in several pieces of regulation. They cannot be listed because they are very different, and they are very different for the classification. But all in all, we can say that we have minor variations and we have major variations. And that minor variations must be notification only with positive silence from the agencies taking 2 to 3 months. However, it is always recommended to wait for their approval documents to avoid problems. And then the major variations should be implemented, approved before implementation. And here we can find diverse timelines and requirements with very short timelines for example, something legal or like a local representative change, to a very long timeline for a change in manufacturing site that might require a new GMP certification. Another post-approval change relevant, it's labeling, and here approval prior implementation, it's mandatory whenever we are talking about efficacy or safety changes. Usually takes 6 months for approval, and we used to include clinical supportive data with no reference countries. So here we work with the clinical expert reports and clinical data. If the label has already been approved in a reference country, it makes the pathway of the approval easier and faster. And there is a special regulation for urgent safety restriction, which is a notification and immediate implementation, and goes separately than the usual labeling approval change. Just for your reference, I have included here the authority fees. The authority fees values you can see are not relevant when we talk about registration of a pharmaceutical product and the investment. I think beyond the inspection, GMP inspection, which is the highest one, and on top of this value in dollars, you must consider to pay the air tickets estimation and the per diem. It's very important to include in the budget for the business development, the authority fees are very reduced also in them for biological product. What is important to mention is these figures are a reference because due to inflation rate or currency change, they are being updated by IPRAT once per year or twice per year. So at the time of submission, you have to identify in the correct current fees list of IPRAT. And now, last words, key elements to register in Argentina. One definition, who can act as marketing authorization holder in Argentina? Any international company could act as marketing authorization holder with a local representative acting on their behalf. So the pharmaceutical legislation allows multinational company to be the local marketing authorization holder. This is not the case for medical devices. In the case of medical devices, the local representative will be the marketing authorization holder. So the way we develop contracts for these two product classification has to be different in order to protect the registrations. The marketing authorization holder can be represented locally either by an Argentinian company acting as distributor or an affiliate that they might decide to include or to develop in the country. And this local representative must have all the requirements I was explaining before. So the qualified person, the resources in warehouse and in quality control lab and so on and so forth. So in this picture, we can understand the levels that we need to cover for register a product in Argentina. First of all, local company. That means that mother company can be the holder represented by a local company or can give the license to a local company directed to act both as market holder and as local representative. What is important is if you would like to keep the marketing authorization holder, there are two approaches to act in Argentina. One, using a hosting, a regulatory hosting before to ensure an advance in the registration timeline, and in the meantime, discussing with the business partner contracts and definitions of the commercialization policy. This really allows and gives freedom to the mother company to negotiate commercial beyond the link to initiating the regulatory pathway in Argentina. And in cases of biologics or Article 5, as the pathway is long, there is a long time that we can be saving here. When the local representative is here, we have to ensure that this company, the local representative, has the QC, the QP, the QA, the array, the importation, and the warehouse, all in place, already inspected by IPRAT, and with all the contracts ready to be an importer of pharmaceutical products. And then the product registration itself goes through the different articles and with the different timelines in order to ensure the launch of that product. I mentioned the scenarios. So with marketing authorization holder, the mother company, we can act with a regulatory hosting, with a commercial license to a local pharmaceutical company, or through an affiliate. The affiliate is setting an Argentinian subsidiary with all the implications it might have and all the structure we have already discussed. The regulatory hosting is the mother company as holder and being represented in the meantime while the business negotiation is going on. And the commercial license is directly with the third party that is going to commercialize the product, or through a distribution or co-marketing agreement also as well. Just as a reference, the investments values, the three models are included here for you to have this in mind. But again, the model to be selected depends on the company decision, business objective, and the product's classification. There are several pros and cons depending on the different scenarios. And I think if we are talking about an innovation, it's clear that the company would like to keep the control of the know-how and ensuring saving the time to the launch. So perhaps the model of the hosting is the best one. If there is a decision of investment, the own company will be there, but of course the cons will be the high cost of the startup, but also the structure that will have to be covered all the time. In the case of the regulatory hosting, the cons are that in future you might need to change the local representative and perform the first batch again. But if the decision is clearly made, you save 1 year in the registration, and then you transfer to your commercial partner to ensure the correct commercialization and first batch authorization being done for your commercial partner. So all these decisions are to be evaluated with the product, with the objective, and with the business team. So the two last words and takeaway messages, very briefly, what we need, the steps to register and to launch a product in Argentina. First, to define a local representative, the legal agreements with the proper due diligence to ensure what you need, the quality agreements, and the access to the local requirements. Secondly, we need to ensure the product registration with the requirements, the CTD, the GMP certification of the manufacturing sites, the risk management plan, and the local equipment and facilities to be able to perform the first batch inspection and ensuring the method transfer and planning for that approval. Once we have the marketing authorization approved already, we have to keep in mind that the validity is only for 5 years, that we have to ensure the artworks development and update, including all the variations, and then that there is a global serialization implemented already in Argentina with a global trade importation number. This is a law already implemented for all the products in Argentina. Then the operative activities, technical support, agreement for testing, method of transfer, the first batch importation. And then each batch that it's importing will again require an inspection. In the quality control, it's for all imported products in the full life of the product. And last but not least, the effective authorization with ANMAT approving notice, giving you the local batch release to the market and including it in the national Vademecum. So very briefly, the steps we need to register the product, the company with a local representative, the prerequisites of a manufacturing site certification, and the risk management plan. The first step, registration of the product. The second step, the first batch approval by the hosting or the final partner where you will be commercialized. And last but not least, launching the product in Argentina. I think that would be the key objective. And with that, I have ended my presentation. I am open to discussion. I hope it was useful. And please make your questions as you need.